Olá, estamos aqui perto da Altice Arena, onde vai haver o Web Summit com o Paddy Cosgrave. Thank you, Paddy. Temos vários estudantes da Universidade Nova de Lisboa e esta é uma iniciativa do Dinheiro Vivo e do DN Insider. Vamos fazer algumas questões a pensar nos próximos 10 anos, até porque o Web Summit vai ficar 10 anos em Lisboa, os próximos 10 anos dos portugueses e da humanidade em geral, com a mente sempre na tecnologia. Passo a palavra.
Web Summit is going to be in Lisbon for 10 years. There is a full generation of people and you can change their way to see the business world. What if you, with Web Summit, could change that generation of people that is about to enter university and adulthood?
I mean, one of the biggest challenges over the last 18 months has been all the uncertainty. And even when we agreed to kind of 3 years, it was really too short to be able to properly plan. And now I think the opportunity is to think about it in terms of a generation. On Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, students from universities and high schools around Portugal will get an opportunity to sit in the kind of center stage, and that it's called the Inspire program. But it's good, but it's by no means enough. And I've met lots of students. I've met a lot. I've been flying into Lisbon and been surrounded by people who've been to the center stage and seen it and had their minds kind of changed. But that's only a few minds. So if 10,000 students, 12,000 students get to see that, I mean that's still only maybe 1% of all the students in the country. And you know, I'd love to work with, in particular, university students in terms of building a year-round program that isn't just about 3 days. What happens the other 362 days of the year? And we now have 10 years. My focus today is Friday. It wouldn't be great, but I'm really looking forward to post-Web Summit and really beginning to plan and, building proper, I think, almost maybe societies or groups in different universities and figure out, okay, well, how do we more meaningfully involve students and inspire students? There's only so much we can do, but we have an ability, I think, to change. Hopefully we've helped a little bit, but change people's mindsets further, especially of parents, I think. So I think also changing the mindset of parents as well to realize that it's okay for their kids to become entrepreneurs, to do computer science, to do engineering, to do business at a young age. I think that's important too. So you got to change this generation and that generation. Great question.
Less than 1% of companies in Portugal are mid-caps with more than 50 million turnover. So what do you think that we need to do in Portugal in order to focus and invest more on competitive scalability and to develop the companies in order not to have a maturation of small and medium enterprises?
That's a really good question, and it's a question that other countries are asking themselves. I think my experience over the last, say, 3 years since I first started coming here is the rate of, it would appear that the number of new companies being started is quite high, which is fantastic. I think that's possibly a change compared to, say, 8 years ago. The big challenge is, can you create more OutSystems or Farfetches or Feed's Eyes? Because if you can do that, that's the real kind of catalyst for growth. And I wonder how much Jose Neves or some of these other CEOs that have gone through this transition from a very small company and an idea and small team to scaling to something incredible. I think it takes, transfer of knowledge is really important. So you can certainly learn in university a great deal, but I also think that and I know that they do this already, some of the success stories that are emerging out of Portugal, the more time they can give back to the next generation of companies that are coming through, I think is very important. And I think the government is working very hard to create the right environment to facilitate the jump from starting to scaling. But if you look at the UK, for example, there's a very good report written by somebody called Sherry Coutu about this massive gap between startups and what she calls scale-ups. So it's a challenge. I think it's a European-wide challenge. Europe has, for example, you're all in university. If you look at the top 500 universities in the world, okay, the top 20 are dominated by American universities. But after that, it's almost like the entire league table is just dominated by European universities. So we're incredible at creating knowledge. We're not bad at starting companies, but there seems to have been some issue with building kind of scale-ups.
We've seen examples such as the Google Assistant exhibition recently, where it's kind of the mixture between a computer speaking and a human is being a bit muddled now. So how do you think that will affect the relationship between businesses and customers? And what do you think is the impact of surpassing a Turing test in business?
That's a very good question. So I think with regards to, say, artificial intelligence, there's interesting work has been done, but there's a lot more to do. I think sometimes there's more hype than reality. If you look at some of the foremost academics in the field, take Rodney Brooks in MIT, who's the most important roboticist in the world. He thinks there's just too much hype at the moment, and that some of the achievements are overstated, and people's minds are getting ahead of actually reality. That being said, I do think that there's lots of time now for philosophizing, thinking about the kind of negative impacts. I do think if you're talking to a robot on the phone, and this has been suggested even by Google, that the robot identify itself as a robot, so that you're not tricked into thinking that you're making a restaurant booking with an AI. And those types of questions. Well, we faced them before. If you think about cars outside.
My questions, it's related with the banking industry. Disruptive technology are changing everything in unpredictable ways. And when it comes to the banking industry, we have new competitors, the fintechs and the big techs. We have the new currencies, the cryptocurrencies. We have changes in the regulations, the PSD2 and in Europe, or the GDPR, for example. So my question is, what do you think will be the future of the banking industry? Will they continue to offer the current portfolio, or will be like fintechs, like stores that offer just a specific topic, like payment services?
That's a very good question. I mean, the person that knows the answer to that question is going to make an unbelievable fortune. And what makes, I think, change in any industry so exciting is we just can't predict the future. With regard to finance, it is suddenly very exciting. Revolut and N26 just didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago. Both Revolut and N26 came to Web Summit as these little tiny startups. And sometimes people go to Web Summit and they see these little startups with their little signs and they're like, oh, look at these little crazy people with their crazy ideas. But, some of those companies like Revolut have gone from those little tiny booths to multi-billion-dollar startups, and that's exciting. There's going to be more fintech startups at Web Summit this year, and you just don't know. I will say one thing: the biggest employers of engineers, I'm sure, in Portugal right now is still the banks. So they have huge capacity to innovate. The question is, can they? And I think some banks around the world, very traditional, very old banks, are innovating, and they're offering new types of products. Their mobile apps are actually quite good. Certainly in the case of Ireland, some of the banks are very old, very dysfunctional. Their mobile apps are very good. I don't know if I've no idea if that's the case in Portugal. They're actually surprisingly good, and it turns out they employ thousands of engineers. So don't write off some of the old kind of guard of companies yet. I think they're going to be in a fight with the new guys, and the ultimate beneficiary, I hope, is all of us.
What are the challenges here between the society, the acceptance of this new technology, and continue to develop this?
Sure. Well, firstly, I don't think new technology is universally good or universally bad. At best, it's neutral. It just depends how it's applied. So jet engines and various forms of propulsion can be used to launch intercontinental ballistic missiles that can, kill millions of people, but they can also just allow us to get on a flight from Lisbon to Porto, and that's a good thing. So all technology, at best is kind of neutral. It just depends to what it's applied. So that's the first thing. In terms of opposition to new technologies, that's been a constant feature, I think, of society almost forever. Of course, I also think it's healthy that there's debate about the merits of any new technology. We shouldn't just accept it as it's going to be a universal good. Very often technologies can be weaponized and turned into very negative and destructive forces. So the burden of responsibility falls on society and on citizens, I think, to always question the underlying utility or application of any new technology, and to guard against the worst excesses of any new technology, and that shouldn't ever change. So people should remain skeptical. I think that's a very important thing.
I have a question regarding the educational system that's in play now. Do you think it's preparing society or students for the real world?
A lot of education is not necessarily designed, nor should it be, to insert information into your mind that's just going to be relevant to you when you enter work. A good part of education is merely training you to think. So the content that you might study, the relevancy of it to the real world, in a sense, doesn't necessarily always have to matter. So reading Plato or Socrates or Aristotle, in some senses, has limited application to 2018, but in another way, exposure to that literature can be a powerful tool just in terms of thinking. Much of maths, for example, I think it's difficult if you've studied maths to imagine how many of the things that you're learning has any application to the real world whatsoever. Now, at a deeper level, it almost certainly does, but nevertheless, a lot of learning maths is merely just a mechanism to train you to think probabilistically or some other way. I only had 8 hours of lectures a week, if that's believable, but I had 8 hours of lectures, and that freedom gave me an immense amount of time to discover other things that I'd never had the opportunity in school to discover. You can spend 3 or 4 years in a drunken mess if you want to. That can also have some upside, I'm sure. But for me, I just got involved in as many aspects of the university outside of the lecture hall as I could. And without knowing, I was learning skills about how to work in a team, how to work with other people, how to try and turn ideas into reality, often failing, but only years later did I realize, oh wow, because I spent so much time outside of the library, outside of the lecture hall, trying to do things in groups, I was unintentionally learning some important skills.